Welcome to the ASQ Podcast, where personal transformation and conscious leadership meet. Did you know that unmet expectations are one of the leading causes of stress and burnout? Why do we set ourselves up for disappointment, and how can we break free? Today, we're exploring the expectation trap and uncovering how self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and resilience can transform your mindset. Stay tuned to discover how to lead authentically and with purpose. How are you today?
Awesome. How are you?
I don't think I'm awesome, but okay. I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah, it's been a
rough. I feel like every time we have an episode, we're like, it's been a rough couple of weeks.
well, the interesting thing is that it is a quest.
Yeah,
I mean, it really is a quest after all.
Indeed.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I don't know what to say about that, but yes, you're right.
I mean, sometimes sometimes you're high, sometimes you're low, sometimes you're crawling in a fetal position.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're
fetal
static.
position.
So I mean, one of my word for this year is equanimity. Right, and it's because regardless of what happens, you got to try to stay balanced. I mean, not in the middle. Like not getting too high, not getting too low, and not letting things affect you. And that's
tough.
A hard position. It is. It is a challenge.
That's tough to do because I think that some people could say, "Well, you're not going through what I'm going through, so you don't know and whatnot." But it's there is something to be said for that. Trying to remain composed, so to speak, so that you can make good decisions and whatever, but
and live
and live and view things as an experience, which is what we like to talk about. So,
but we digress.
Yes,
we digress
slightly. We digressed, but not really.
No,
because what I'm saying alludes to what we're discussing today, which is about unmet expectations.
Unmet expectations.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And so let me start with a quote first. Because
we always start. I don't know why we like quotes. We quote movies, we quote people, we quote. We just like quoting.
I like quoting people.
There's nothing new under
movies.
the sun, right?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. So this quote is by Brene Brown, who's my favorite. And it says, disappointment is unmet expectations. The more significant the expectations, the more significant the disappointment. Yeah.
That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot to say. Disappointment and expect. Why did you choose that quote?
So, full transparency.
You
chose the quote.
I chose the
full transparency. You're liking Brene Brown just as much as I am. Come on, Brene Brown, give us some props.
I like your work on vulnerability. Yes, I do.
So what comes to mind
to
me?
To you.
Immediately, what I think is, because I learned this lesson several years ago. And I don't even know who I learned it from, to be honest with you, but somebody had said to me, Jesse, the problem with expectations is that when you set expectations, you're already setting yourself up for disappointment because nobody will ever meet your expectations.
Okay.
So what that means, or what that meant to me, is because in the scenario, in the situation that I was in the moment, was I had asked somebody to do something and I had an expectation.
Yep.
I didn't communicate that expectation very effectively.
Okay.
Because that's a part of this whole component.
Okay.
And as a result, I got something back that was sort of not what I was expecting. Yeah. And I was just like, seriously? This could have been done so much better. Like, what happened? And I was disappointed in this person. I was like, what do I have to do? Handhold this person? Like, I then started placing judgment on this person and expecting them to read my mind, expecting them to know what it is that I wanted. And I was upset about it. And I really didn't understand it until I had talked to a friend about a colleague at the time, and I had said whatever. And that's when she said, anytime you set an expectation, you are likely to be disappointed because they're never going to reach your expectations. So they're not going to meet them. Now, obviously later on in life or later years, I've learned that it's important to communicate the expectations too.
No, it's interesting, right? Because, what you're relating to or explaining in your situation, it's about in interpersonal relationships, right? Or relationships with other people, period. Right? So the expectations that we place on other people. That's what kind of like you're relating to. My mind went into,
That's why I'm here.
to keep me grounded, right? So my mind right away goes into, the expectations that we put on life, that expectations that are put upon us by things outside of us. Right?
External
expectations, right? So, or how you should be, how you should behave, and the expectations societal. So, to me, and it's good that we see it for different points of views, right? Because you're looking at it from the micro point of view. I'm looking at it also from the micro, but in addition to that, the macro, the big perspective. In terms of, what are the expectations that we have on life. Right, because it's interesting. I have
so much to say about that.
Yeah, so this is kind of like it's a heavy topic, right? Because again, should we not have expectations, right? But is expectations the right thing to strive for, or is there something else?
That's a good question.
So it's kind of like let's take this episode to unpack that.
All right.
Or try it at least.
Yeah, at least. I think we're sort of doing this a little bit differently. Typically, we kind of have we have things that we want to talk about, but I kind of have questions.
Okay,
I want to use to guide our conversation, right? So the first one is, and I don't want to read it verbatim, but I am kind of reading it verbatim because I don't know this by heart. But what's the difference between intention and expectation, which is what you were kind of alluding to, and why does it matter in personal growth and for leadership purposes? So at the micro and then the macro level, so to speak, right?
Yeah. So
I want to hear your thoughts.
This is a big one right here, right? So let's talk about intention, or from a personal growth perspective, right? Like, what is the intention of that? Like, what's the point of personal growth?
To learn more things, to embrace being evolving, embracing just the growth, the learning more things, expounding on your experiences, living from a different perspective, because the intention is that you want information, that you want to learn, that you want to gain knowledge.
What is it though?
Right? I don't know you were going to do that.
No.
You were setting me up.
No, because the reality is this, right? Like when we think of personal growth, right, we're looking always in the way that is presented, we're looking at what is the end result. That is a very Western mind to think, right? What is the end result? If I'm going to grow as a person, right? If that's the intention. So the expectation is that I'm gaining something from it. What is it that you're wanting to gain? Right? So if you're wanting to gain clarity, if you're wanting to gain peace, if you're wanting to gain all that, right? Personal growth will give you that. Right? Because then you start defining what peace is and setting the idea on what that will look like to you. Right? However, if you start thinking that you're growing as an individual primarily and only for the purpose of input and output, right? What am I going to get at the end in terms of my surroundings, right? Am I going to gain something financially?
I know where you're going.
Am I going to get something physically and physically, primarily physical, right? Because we do live in a capitalistic world and a materialistic world. So we have to be careful when we set that expectation in terms of what is my intention with that. If the expectation of personal growth, right, and the reasons why I'm intending to get this is because I want something, right, physical to materialize, you got to check that, find out why that is, right? So because it's complex, right? That's why I've been finding the question, what is your why, somewhat problematic, right? Because a lot of the times when we think of a why, is because I don't want to be poor, or I want to show them that I'm much better than this, right? I want to prove to the world that I'm a winner. Mm-hmm. When does that stop?
Well, that's a hard expectation.
Right, but when does it stop?
Yeah, it doesn't.
Right? So when you start thinking about intentions, expectations, is what is it that at the essence of it all, this is really truly what you want, right? If you're seeking power, which I don't have anything against it. For those of people that want power, they want power. I don't mind to tell them otherwise, right? But if people are seeking power and attention and adoration from other people, right? That's fickle. It comes and goes, right? People love you one day, and the next day you're screaming out a tu brute because you get stabbed in the back.
That's true.
Right? Yeah. So if that is your expectation for all this growth, that adoration, right? That could be fickle, right? Now, if you're looking for a sense of peace, a sense of communing, sharing, right? Then that's something else entirely that you're looking for.
I could push back on that.
Okay, well, push back.
I push back because you want community. You want that. But if you're doing community, in essence, means being around other people, right? Being and having relationships with people, whether they're colleagues or friends or whatever. You are setting the expectation that you're going to have this community and it's always going to be great. But I mean, I've had there's friends that I have that we don't talk anymore. You know what I mean? And it's not necessarily because it was, in some cases it was because I was like, I just don't want this kind of, negativity in my life. And so I had to make decisions. And I also had to do that with my family member. I mean, I've talked about my dad. So that's a hard decision to make. Yeah. But if you're having the expectation that you're going to have community and you're going to have peace, you may not always have it. You can try, but people are going to disappoint you.
Yeah. And again, everybody has different desires. Everybody has different whys, right? Or what they do, right? So the question is, if you go into a situation, and I hope that we're staying on track, right? If you go into a situation, right, when you are understanding that everybody has their own thing. People are complex.
Right.
They may say one thing one moment and they do something else the next, because we're like our own little universes that things go haywire.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what will you do when you realize this is what I want, but I'm going into an unpredictable situation? What will you do?
Well, that goes back to what I said to begin with. You have to, if you go into a situation expecting an outcome, you have to know that you may not get or receive that outcome. That may not be what you get. Yep. And so can you be thankful for what you get out of it and be grateful for the opportunity to be in community with others and to have experienced this, whatever the experience is, and walk away from it going, I'm glad I did that anyways. It's not necessarily for me, but whatever. It's okay. It's not what I was expecting. You know what I mean? And be okay with that. Yeah. Cause that's what I think. Like if you're going into a situation in the expectation, I'm gonna have a blast, I'm gonna have a great time, it's gonna be amazing, something's gonna come along and fuck it up.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time, that's what happens.
And then in some cases, it doesn't, and it's great.
Fine,
I mean, we've done things where we've gone out with people, and it's been like, okay, I thought we all agreed we're gonna go to this restaurant, and then it's like,
and it switches,
and then there's no agreement. I'm like, oh my god, let's just freaking go somewhere. I'm starving, and it's not the way I expected it to go. I wanted it to be like flow, and it just So the idea is, like I said, it was going back to what I said initially, is that if you go into a situation with an expectation, you're going to be let down.
More than likely.
If your expectations are set, and they're set too high because they're your expectations and you didn't communicate your expectations.
Yeah. So then under those circumstances, right, again.
So we're staying on track. I just want you to know.
Yeah. So from experience, right, this is kind of like some of the conclusions that I arrived to, right? It's being able to consciously understand, okay, I'm going into this conversation. I'm going into this situation. What is it that I'm intending? What do I want? right? What is it that I want out of this interaction, right? Do I want conflict and all that stuff? No. I want peace. I want to be able to enjoy myself. I don't know exactly how, but I want to be able to enjoy myself. I wanted to have a good time, or I want to be able to have an interactions with someone and have a good conversation and just leave it at that.
Right.
And see what happens, right? So I've come to that point of view in which sometimes my expectations now is allowing things to happen, right? In certain situations, right? Because you have to, let's say...
You mean like going with the flow of whatever happens? Going with the flow
of things, because again, there's so much unpredictability when it comes to people, right? In relation to that, answering the first aspect about personal growth, there's so much... People are very complex, They might get stung by a bee one moment, and they get upset and they get angry and they may act violently, right? Well, you're just over there having a good time. Right. So like you have all these different things. So to expect that constant, with people is something that I personally think that is unrealistic. Now, when it comes to leadership, right? When you're in a situation in which you have to lead others, you have to lead a family, you have to lead all this stuff, right? There are certain expectations that you set, right?
Right.
And those expectations are standards, right? In which, in order to have consistency, in order to have structure, in order to maintain things, you have to have that's a certain level of expectations.
Right.
Right. In terms of, for instance, when we come into our house, our expectation is for you to take off your shoes, right? When you go up front. You don't come,
Oh, yeah, at the front door. Sorry.
At the front door.
I thought you meant
right?
I don't take my shoes off. What?
Yeah, no, at the front door, you take off your shoes, right? I mean, some people may not like that, but that's the expectation that we have here, right? Number one. Number two, an expectation is that we're going to take care of the house, right? To make sure that it's clean, make sure that it's organized, make sure that everything's fine. Right, so there are things in which you have to have a certain level of discipline, right? And in leadership, you have to set expectations in terms of performance, right? But the one thing that most leaders do, and leadership applies to everybody, really, right? Is that a lot of leaders expect it without demonstrating,
right?
That's the thing, right? Because how can I expect you to do something the way that I wanted for you to do it if I haven't shown you what that looks like?
Right. Leaders are seen, not heard, so to speak.
Yeah. And again, it's like I was having this conversation with someone about leadership, and it's like, oh, I'm a servant leader. And I said, okay, what does that look like? Like, what does that look like? You're constantly serving people. So if you're a servant leader, are you empowering those people, or you are just serving constantly in a serving state, right? Because leadership has to be practical, right? A leader imparts information and knowledge and leads others so they're able to be the best version that they could be for whatever goal you have.
Which is what servant leadership is.
Right? But what you're talking about, it's a mode of being, demonstrating, but also you have to have a mode of teaching, right? That's why I'm so baffled when I talk about leadership and people don't understand situational leadership, right? Because again, if I bring you in, right, despite of your knowledge, if I have a kid, this is the standards that we set. I do, we do, now you do, right? I'm going to coach you. I'm going to supervise you. After that, I'm delegating.
Right. And I'm available to help you.
Precisely.
At that point. Yes.
Precisely, right? But it's like everybody, have these abstract ideas because, again, when you set expectations, right, when it comes to interactions with others, you have to be able to also say, this is how I like to be treated.
Correct.
Right? But when I'm in a community, I work in a field in which, everybody talks about trauma-informed care, right? But a lot of people don't practice that. They know it, but can you live it?
Yeah.
Because there is one thing just to know it here. It's one thing to begin to, use it for here, because particularly in the work setting, because it's like, well, I'm paying you and you need to do what I tell you to do.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of that out there.
Right. So then where does that, again, when it comes to that, what is the difference? When you set the intention, right, your intention is to be focused. So it's like on whenever I do something, what is the intention? Is the intention for me to gain power? Mm-hmm. Is the intention for me to be at peace? What is the intention here? Once you understand what it is that you want, then you set the expectation as to this is how I would like to be treated. Mm-hmm. And with the understanding, with the real understanding, that you are not going to get that all the time, because people are complex,
right? And
emotions are complex,
right?
That's my take.
Well, and I that's a good. I mean, you're right, because that's just it. It's just. I mean, we started talking about this, and you asked me about intentions or whatever, or you asked me what I felt about this, and I told you that my situation at work with this colleague of mine. And the truth of the matter is that if I would have had this position of people are complex and I have to be able to state my expectations and communicate my vision, and that way I could get a product back in return that was meaningful or more in alignment with what it is that we were looking to do for this particular project. Things might have been a little different, and I might have even helped develop this person even better, right? Instead, I was irritated, left it alone for like 3 days, boiled on it for a couple of days. So this goes into our next question. And I literally just stewed on it for a little bit. And then I went to this person and I said, so I wanted to talk about the project. And I said, I feel like you did a really great job, but there are some modifications that I want to make after thinking about what I would like this to look like in the end. And we're trying to accomplish these goals for this organization. And so we need this to align with those goals and to represent that mission and vision. Right. And she was just like, thank you so much. I'm happy to improve. And she responded like, I'm so glad you're showing me how to do this. Can you just teach me how to do this? And I think she was using Canva or Photoshop or something. And I said, sure, I can show you really quick. And it was a good professional courtesy, communication, all the good stuff. And it felt good because I felt like, okay, I walked away feeling like I learned something. I took something away from that, knowing that I could have done a better job communicating what it is that I wanted with the project. And thus I wasted days because I didn't do that. And so it's a learning experience for me professionally and even on a personal level, you know what I mean? Which goes into, I mean, we've kind of talked about how it's impacted our personal and professional, but
I mean, I think about parenting.
Parenting is
because again, it's like you got to look at different aspects of your life, right? So let's talk about parenting for a moment and setting the expectations, right? And being a parent, whoever that's done it, it's not an easy thing to do, right? Because you have to be able to, you bring this person into the world, you have to mold them and give them values, give them standards so that they could operate in society and then consequently eventually find their own way, right? While all at the same time, they have all this, their own universe forming and asking questions and growing and expanding and discovering who they are and all that stuff, all at the same time, guiding them, right? So it's very challenging to figure out, okay, what is it? How is it that I'm going to do that? And also having to discipline and having to make sure that you're guiding the right direction. So how do you set expectations for this individual, this being, so that they're successful in life, right? Yeah. And again, it's
and that's tough because you're going to meet resistance. They're not going to meet your expectations.
They're not a willing participant,
right? Not always,
right? They're not a willing participant. This is something. Like parenting is like really a great test of leadership. But potential.
That's going back to what you just alluded to earlier, not alluded to, though, what you actually said earlier, which is understanding that humans are complex.
Yes.
Your own children, your own biological things are complex.
Let me ask you a question. Why are teenagers and parents always fighting?
I mean, on a practical level, for me, thinking about it, I think it's not listening and having thinking you're listening, not having the self-awareness to know that you're not really listening because you want something to go your way.
Okay.
And so you're having this communication barrier because they're not saying what I want you to say.
Correct.
Again, it's an expectation.
But what is it that a teenager wants at that stage?
Freedom, flexibility.
Okay.
To go out, be with their friends, autonomy, to do
Find
their own
out
thing,
who they
make
are.
their own decisions.
Okay.
They want to learn how to drive. They want to
Okay.
do all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, is that a natural thing?
Absolutely.
Right. So then the more we understand about people and about ourselves, we could start understanding how to navigate situations like that. Right. Like I remember, I never really had an issue. We really never really had an issue with our boys.
With our kids, no.
Right. Particularly when they're teenagers, not even in things of sex, not even in things like that. Because these were conversations that we had openly and allowed them the opportunities to explore it and think about it and talk about it, right? To the moment in which when they, oh shit.
Yeah.
Right, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we did a training for a corporate training. And one of the things that you put into the slide deck was what's the dude's name? It's a
Mr.
wonderful
Rogers,
day.
Mr. Rogers.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I was about to sing it. Thank God. You saved everybody that's listening to us right now. I was going to sing it. And you said,
won't you be my neighbor? Sorry.
oh, won't you be? No. Okay.
Go ahead.
I used to love that show. And I don't remember the clip.
I will tell you what he
100%.
said. He says,
this is so deep though.
Oprah asked Mr. Rogers, what is the thing that most parents get wrong about parenting? And he said, simply, most parents forget that they were once kids.
Right.
Right? So when you're put in that situation, right, it's going back and ask, oh, what is it that I wanted when I was that age?
Right.
And being honest about it, right? Being honest about what is it that a kid wants at this stage. I mean, and you could learn it, if you do proper introspection and look where you were and where you are. If you're honest, right? Because some people say, well, I was like, no, it's like, no, you were horny, you wanted to skip school.
Okay.
It's just biology. So you try to be cool, you try to fit in, you hit all the fads because you don't want to be the other. Right. So when you understand that and you understand the pressure that kids feel as a parent, you're more aware. But no, that's not what happens. No. Typically, our expectation is that, yes, we do want, our intention as parents is that we want them to be successful.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
And we want them to avoid the mistakes that we've made, right? But at the same token, what happens a lot of the time is that this happens, right? Yeah. Like this continues to happen. So when it comes to so that's one aspect, right? Let me talk about my professional career, right? So, I worked at the Gap for a while and I did a lot of trainings, elements of, I used to, train people and do all that stuff. And that was an aspect of my professional life that it was cool. I liked it. And I went into sales and I did sales for a little bit. But I sales is a very, very competitive place, right? It's not that I can't do it. I could do it, but it wasn't my heart, right? So I went into nonprofit, right? With the expectation, right? That people in the nonprofit are not as competitive or are not as that.
Wrong. Right? Completely really wrong.
I mean, you think of Game of Thrones?
Damn wrong.
You think of Game of Thrones? Game of Thrones is like, and people
that.
think like business people are competitive and stuff like that. That you expect.
Yeah, in the business world, in the for-profit.
You expect that, so you prepare yourself to go in. Now, I wasn't ready to go into the nonprofit world because I've never seen crap like this ever, but the reality is this, like, you set a certain picture in your mind about how things are going to be, which is problematic because, again, you walk into a situation with a certain expectation, right? Without really looking and understanding, because the most important thing to understand, and regardless of where you are, is human nature. And human nature is simple. There's three things. I mean, for me, I've come to kind of like broken it down to these three things. Number one, self-preservation. The most important person to any individual is themselves, right? Yep. That translates later on into my family, my community. It does expand, right? That idea of self-preservation, right? But primarily it's themselves, right? Second is that drive force of called the libido, the life force, that idea of power and destruction, right? Mm-hmm. So you have that, excuse me. Right. Thank you. And finally, is that idea of belonging, right? Because we want to belong to something, right? We're social creatures. We love to interact. Some of us are within the spectrum, right? Some of us are more love to interact more. Some of us love to interact less.
Yeah.
Within the spectrum, most of us are kind of like in the middle, right? But when you go in the standard deviation of stuff, like that's kind of like how it goes, right? So the idea is that whenever we go into a situation, we have to understand that regardless of how benign it looks, like an NGO or something like that, there's still those things always apply. Right. So having that reality, right, it's almost like what Sun Tzu said, understand the landscape. Right. Because whatever endeavor you go into, if your expectation is that it's going to be peaceful and perfect, that's not the case.
Not realistic.
It's not that it won't be, it's that you should be able to acknowledge the reality of what people could be. Not that they're that, not to pass judgment. But if something happens now, I'm not surprised. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't see the coming, but I get it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing professionally and personally that I've learned from my experience. But what else you got?
All right. So, because we're narrowing down on time here. So just a couple of strategies that we can use to balance high expectations to be more compassionate and, ultimately foster cultures, whether it's in your home, in your community, in your workplace, that is peaceful and is to be expected. Like to what kind of strategies can we implement? What do you think?
I mean, first and foremost, this is the old adage: know thyself. You have to know yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Like really, that's like the most fundamental thing. It's like we think we know ourselves. Yeah. Yeah. Like what we know is what people have told us that we are. Right. And
we've allowed that to
be ingrained
in us and live that way. Yeah. Live by somebody else's thoughts of what we are.
Impressions.
Yes.
What others' impressions is, right? It's like that's really truly the real matrix. Like from an analogy standpoint. That's a good point. Is the idea that we don't really know who we are. I was talking to someone this afternoon, an amazing guy, doing a lot of great stuff, and we were talking about shadow work, right? And shadow work really, it's about confronting things, getting past that confrontation to arrive at your as to who you really are.
Right.
Which is a lot of the work that we do. That's what the Soul's Quest book is going to talk about, those type of things. But first and foremost, strategy number one is know thyself. Know thyself. Know the beauty of you, know the darkness of you.
Yes.
Yeah, because nobody wants to accept that. Everybody's
the shadow. The shadow.
Yeah. Our biases.
I was literally talking to somebody about that today. Like, understand, like, if people don't understand their shadow, their shadow aspect, their darkness, you have to get to know those things in order to be able to know thyself. Yep. You have to.
Yep. We're not all good. We think we are.
Yeah. No. Come on.
We all have
those tendencies.
The propensity for good and evil. And we have to it's not to keep it at bay, but it's to be able to know it. Oh, there. Oh, okay. Right. I always ask kids, it's like, when I work with kids that, they got in trouble, and I said, I don't ask them, it's like, why did you do it? And I said, how did it feel?
Right.
And they're like, what? It's like, come on, man. How did it feel? It's like, it was fun. It was exciting. Like, I feel like alive. And I was like, exactly.
Right.
But you see that?
Yeah.
It's like you do things. It's like people think that they do the thing, but it's really the excitement of it all, right? Like that feeling, because it feeds that nature of who we are.
I was going
right?
to say that natural thing inside of you.
It's the same thing that happens when you got power over somebody else.
Let's not go there.
No, but that's how it is. It's It is.
Or when people want to exercise power over you.
Correct. But again, from their standpoint, this is a shadow aspect, right? But it's just a natural thing. So first, know yourself.
Know yourself. Okay. Right? So number 2.
The second thing.
Give me 3 things.
Okay, so about expectations, right? To round regrets. Again, know yourself. Know your surroundings. Get to know. If the more there's a lot of working philosophy about the more you know yourself, the more you understand other people, right? Because the more you understand, your passions, your desires, like you could recognize it in others. So it's easier, number one, to connect and be empathic, right? But it's also easier to say, oh, I see that. I'm not going to deal with that right now. I'm just going to keep that at bay. Not because I hate that person, just because it's not for me.
It doesn't serve me.
It doesn't serve me, right?
Yeah.
So you have to understand your surroundings. You have to understand the people around you. You have to understand the scope of where you are. So you got to understand them. Like the last thing that I would say when it comes to expectation is really you have to really know what you are desiring.
Isn't that along the lines of knowing thyself?
No, because you know yourself. It's like, oh, I could be this, I could be that, I could be that, right? Knowing your desires is understanding truly the reasons why you do what you do, right? And understanding that. So again, I gave the example. And this happened to me, and it cost us. Oh, I want to do this because I want to show them I'm good. I want to show them, right? And that didn't turn out too well. It was completely the wrong place to come from, right? And I learned my lesson when it came to that. But again, that's a shadow aspect that I have to recognize, right? But when you see that, you start realizing, that's my foot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was like, why does that feel warm? I thought it was the table. Sorry.
Right? So when you look at that, right, you have to start really like, what is my desire?
That's interesting.
Right? It's
That's
like
a good one.
when you ask anybody, what do you want? Oh, I just want a lot of money. For what?
Why?
Okay. And what is a lot of money? What's the number? Oh, I want to be a billionaire. Like, but why? Right? Because if you start asking those questions, because why is like a question that just digs you in a cycle, right? And then you start realizing, oh, I just want to be noticed. I just want to belong. I just want to be loved. I just want to be accepted. Some people just want to create. But you have to know really, truly what your desires are, right? Because if your desire is external, because you want to show something or be someone, that's always problematic. Always. Right? It's always problematic. And yes, we do want to be something, right?
Of course.
Everybody does. But you have to understand your reasoning behind it, right? It's like, this is what you see, all these artists and all these celebrities that wanted to be famous, right? I want to be famous. I want to be famous. And then they hate the shit and end up killing themselves. But they wanted that, right? But why did they want that? Because they wanted to get that love. But after they found it, they felt empty.
Yeah.
Right. So that will be my 3 things, because you have to really deep down, because again, this what we do at Soul's Quest, so Empowerment Service, is not for the faint of heart, because you got to be honest.
Right.
Like you really do. You got to be honest with yourself as to like, what is it? Those things. You got to see yourself in the mirror, like naked, and be like, okay, I see all of it. I see myself for what I am. I get it. The good, the bad, the ugly. And I know that I could live my life with equanimity, number one, right? I see the same that I see in me, I see in others. And some people I'm going to bond with, and some people I'm going to repel. And that's okay, right? But also, I want to understand, you need to know truly why you're doing what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, most people just want to create.
Yeah.
And they want to belong, right?
Yeah.
Most people do, right? It's one of our needs. Right?
Belonging. Yeah.
But we also go around it in the wrong way. We go on to belong at the expense of somebody else, and that's not the right way to go about it.
That's true too.
Yeah, I don't advocate for that.
Yeah.
Because you could get everything that you want, but I don't advocate doing that again at the expense of other people.
Right.
And you see that, number one, a lot.
Yeah.
In leadership.
Oh yeah, definitely. A lot in leadership.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
All right. So how can we embrace life's transitions, the things that we go through, and help us shift from having like these really solid, like this is what it's going to be, period, to having more of a like a growth mindset and that wanting to expand.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Like I have thoughts of that.
I mean, that's the thing about our Western mind, right? And again, it's like I don't see the West as good or evil like a lot of people do. You know, it's a different way of looking at the world, right? We're driven. All of us are, regardless of race, regardless of whatever it is. It's like, you know, when you grew up in the West, there's that thing, there's that drive about individualism and that idea of, I got to be somebody, I'm going to be somebody, I'm going to be somebody, I'm going to be the best, I'm going to be the best, I'm going to be the best, right? Yeah. And you have to, again, purify that desire and shift it to, I want to live fully. I want to express myself fully, right? Without violating the rights of other people, right? I want to live from that essence, you know? It's again, it goes back to that. What is your intention? To be noticed and to share, look at me, right? Or to live from that point of view, which is what we advocate, right? Living from that essence, that authentic essence of who you are, right? Because when you live from that, you're curious about life, right? You know, you're curious about, you know, just things, and everything just becomes so much more vivid, right? You see more beauty. Right? Even when you go to the struggles, right? Even the struggles make sense. It's like, oh, okay. Yeah. You know, although when you're going through it, it's challenging. But
it is. That's what I was going to talk about, because I know that, you know, for you and I, our roles with A Soul's Quest and even with ASQ Empowerment Services is that we're philosophical and practical and philosophical. Like we kind of shift, you know, those roles, you know. And I think for me, on a practical level, you know, shifting from that rigid mindset falls into the philosophical, but on a practical sense is what you were just about to say, or what you were leading into, is that I think what happens when you have a mindset that is so rigid and expectations that you're just like, nope, it's going to be this way. I don't give a damn. I don't give a fuck how it's going to go. This is how it's going to be. You don't allow yourself, when you don't allow yourself to color outside the lines, you miss the beauty of what could actually be put on paper for the purposes of my analogy. Yep. And I think that it's okay to color outside the lines. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to not have things turn out perfect. And you're going to meet people who are not going to align with that. Yep. And that's going to be a very difficult thing to go through. But I think maintaining your knowing yourself, knowing your why, and living from that position, from that knowing, you can live from that authenticity that we so much that we talk about. That's what we talk. That's what we are talking about, our authentic essence. Yeah. And for me, that's been a huge lesson, and I'm still going through that evolution. And I think we always will go through these evolutions, and I think it'll become a little easier as I get older. But you know, I was just telling you the other day, I'm like, I'm 52, and this is what I was expecting at 52. What's going on? And it's that rigid mentality that isn't allowing me, if I don't change it, I recognize it, to be able to live from my authentic essence and have a growth mindset and experience beauty that I could be missing by living with these rigid, you know, expectations. Yeah. And so that was my more practical.
I like the quote that you put out this week. We must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us, right? That's a Joseph Campbell quote, right?
Ooh, that gave me chills.
Yeah, but the idea is, because it's right. It's like when we set expectations.
That was a good one. I came up with that one.
No, you did.
Well, Joseph did, but yeah.
Well, yeah. But and that's really what happens, right? When we become so rigid, right? That's when tyranny begins to happen, right? And then because we are our worst villains. When we become that rigid, we don't allow ourselves to be open to new possibilities, you know. And life has a way to break you open from that, whether you want to or not, right? Because life has a way, because the idea of life is to constantly evolve. Nothing in life stays static. Yeah. It's constant motion. That's true. We have to be able to, accept that. And kind of let go with certain things. Now,
and having that mindset, just to piggyback on what you're saying, is that's what, we talked about this when we were introducing the episode. That's what facilitates resilience. That's what facilitates that authenticity. That those are things that matter and fosters that beauty.
And it builds better relationships.
Absolutely.
It goes into everything. It goes into everything that you do when you start really understanding those different aspects of yourself, seeing beauty, seeing the challenge, the frustrations as something that evolves, that helps you evolve into a next plateau. So it kind of like goes like that. So
yeah. No, this was good. I'm certain that we're going to get some positive feedback, because I think this is a good topic. I think this is a topic that's definitely something we can revisit in other episodes. So thank you for tuning into The Expectation Trap. Remember, breaking free starts with self-awareness and embracing life's transitions with grace. Don't forget to follow us on social media and click share if you enjoyed this episode.